Quick, think of a game that doesn't have any movement. Chess? You move the pieces. Papers, please? You move papers. Alright, sure, it's a bit of a stretch to call this movement, but you can't deny that most games feature a movement mechanic of some kind. I mean, it's kinda hard to make a game that doesn't have you traverse through the world, unless the world traverses to you. It's the most important mechanic in gaming. It can make or break a game's success. When it's done well, you often can't even tell, but when it's done bad, oh boy do you realise. Sometimes you replay an old game you thought had great movement, but with older and wiser eyes you realise. You may be thinking that something like combat is more important, but then that would just be silly. Whether it's a third-person adventure game, an FPS, or hell even a strategy game, movement mechanics flow through their veins. So how do some games make movement seem like a chore, and others make it so good you never want to use fast travel? Let's start with the basics. Here's a character. The character is now running. She can also jump. Alright, that's all well and good. It's not exactly exciting, but put in some combat and a pretty environment and hey presto, we have ourselves a AAA title. A lot of games can get by with a character that runs, rolls, jumps, and maybe does a little hop over obstacles, and that's fine. It's nothing exciting, but it shouldn't detract from the game in any way. That is if the environment is built properly for it. Few things bore me more than a game with this basic style of movement, but a giant empty world. Having a game with the standard set of movement mechanics and nothing more is completely fine, as long as it relies more on its environment, tension, or story to make up for it. For example, nobody plays Alien Isolation and goes, "Whoa, the way you move in this game is so fun." You play it because it scares the bejesus out of you, and the tension is immeasurable. In fact, having more dynamic movement mechanics in this game would be a detriment, because a big part of the tension is that you can't outrun the alien, and feeling more helpless only adds to the terror and excitement. It wouldn't quite work if every time you saw the alien coming after you, you just went, "Parkour! Parkour! Parkour!" So in this way, movement is important for the opposite reason. The limitation of it is what matters. But what if the game is a sprawling open world fantasy adventure? Well, you have two options. Either make the rest of the game work with your character's movement style, or change the movement style. There are many ways to make movement in games more interesting, utilising a number of different mechanics. The classics are your double jumps, your wall running, your dodges, and your slides. But the great games build upon these and allow each move to be chained together in a very fluid way. Being able to run on a wall in Titanfall to increase speed, to then hook onto a wall and whip over the rooftops, to then use your double jump to glide further and slide upon the ground upon landing is wildly satisfying, especially when you've just covered half the map in one go. Or to hook, triple jump and dash your way through Ori one after another at neck-breaking pace whilst you slap your enemies silly on the way without ever even touching the ground is so fun. It all just flows. I mean heck, in Sunset Overdrive you can grind on literally anything, including water. Having many different movement mechanics also gives you options. Now every time you go from point A to B, you can do it with double jumps and wall runs and hooks and teleports, and every time you gotta get somewhere you can mix it up each time. And the better you are at chaining these abilities together, the better you are at keeping your momentum. And momentum is everything when it comes to fun movement. In fact, momentum can be so fun that an entire point of a game can be about movement. Personally, these types of games are some of my favourites. Mirror's Edge is one of these games. There's a tiny bit of gunplay, but the entire premise is running and jumping. A game that's practically nothing but movement, and it's fun as heck. As well as incorporating many of the elements I just talked about, such as chaining together mechanics and keeping a sense of pace, it's also very welcoming. It's hard to get frustrated at where to go next when you just need to barge through the red doors or climb the red pipes, elements that are easily visible from a mile away. This allows you to keep your speed and not interrupt the flow of the game by standing around wondering where to go next. But games also need to be forgiving in the mechanical sense, such as in Celeste, when you can still jump a few frames after falling off the edge or land on the ground if you landed just a tinsy bit off. There's a lot of games out there that feature huge maps with loads to explore, so they say. In reality, too many of these maps are basically the same environment for miles and miles with nothing in them besides some rocks and a lone hut that houses a man in his request to find his wife's missing necklace as he sits on his arse and does nothing whilst I do all the work. If you have a big bland empty map with the occasional detailed and exciting city, then to make the game fun, you need an interesting way of traversing it. Take The Pathless, a game with a very minimal design. A lot of it is a big open field, but instead of just running through it, you have to shoot arrows at spots along the route to increase your speed. And for an extra risk factor, you can time your shot to release when a talisman is only half full for a quicker shot. It's rare to see a game incorporate this type of movement. It's basically a mini game just for movement. It actually makes you think and challenges you somewhat. Or take one of my favourite games. New York City is a cool map. There's a lot going on visually, but imagine if in this game, instead of playing as Spider-Man, you played as John Johnson, secret agent, who runs around and shoots bad guys. He sprints and crouches and ducks behind cover, but he's not Spider-Man. so all verticality is gone. He's also not as fast, so he jogs down 56th Street rather than leaping 17 blocks in a single swing. Obviously this is fine, not every game needs to be Spider-Man, but the map needs to fit the movement. New York City and Spider-Man is designed for the fact you'll be spending 90% of your time swinging between buildings doing flips at wicked speed. If you instead had to run through the city, it would get boring pretty fast. It's just a city. You can't enter any buildings besides a few for quests, and outside of some fun Easter eggs or unique buildings, it's all pretty much the same. But you won't be seeing any of this anyway because you're 80 stories high parkouring through a water tower, so it doesn't matter. But if you designed a New York City with John Johnston as the titular character, then you'd need to change things. There would need to be a lot more going on in a relatively tighter space. More obstacles to hide behind, more buildings to enter, tighter corners, and more NPCs telling you that it's always something in this town.
Jeez Louise, it's always something in this town. Web slinger!
Basically, the more empty and large the world, the more exciting and quicker the movement should be. And if you need your character to be more minimal and grounded in their movement, then scale down the world and reduce those massive open spaces where you just sit there holding down forward on the analog stick. Incorporate elements into the game that require you to think and act more, distracting you from the fact that you're just moving. These could be obstacles, enemies, or difficult routes that require planning and skill, an environment that's rich with design and story beats, or an area that's full of tension and emotion. Like Death Stranding, where walking from point A to B has never been so infuriating. Love it or hate it, the game is a good example of making you think as much as possible about walking. You can't just run where you want willy-nilly whilst leaning back and eating snacks. You've got to plan your route and weigh out the pros and cons of which way you'll go. Different routes have varying difficulties of terrain or threats. You can take the shorter but more dangerous route that's full of black gooey monsters that kills you pretty quickly, or take the longer route but risk being hit by timefall, which is a rain that accelerates the passage of time of anything it touches, which damages your packages. And after selecting your route, you've got to walk there, which is a challenge unto itself in this game. Honestly, I love it. But how about a less divisive game? Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't exactly a heavy parkour, super fast, slidey, superhero action extravaganza, but if you want to get from point A to point B without fast travel, well, you can either run or you can get on your horse. In any Rockstar game, if you have to run somewhere, it's one of the most boring parts of the game. I still remember the times I played GTA and accidentally wrecked my car in the middle of a forest somewhere and had to run all the way back to the city to find a car. And then the only car in a 10-mile radius drove past me and I couldn't catch it in time, so I just kept running and running and running. Luckily, the only times you're running in GTA or Red Dead is to go from cover to cover or to chase down an old lady to beat her up. But Rockstar maps are huge, and giving Arthur Morgan the ability to grapple hook between trees would be just a little bit out of place. So like most open world games, you can also ride a horse. Not exactly anything new, but a vehicle of some kind makes traversal a bit more interesting. But I find this can cause developers to rely too much on the vehicle, potentially sacrificing creative ways of making character movement more interesting, or not adapting the environment to work well both on foot and in a vehicle. Weirdly enough though, I find riding on horseback in Red Dead 2 oddly relaxing and enjoyable. And I wasn't sure why at first, but as I thought about it, I came to realise it does many things subtly well. To begin with, the environment is gorgeous. The incredibly realistic, sometimes too much, nature of the game meant that riding as a cowboy through the Wild West as the sun was setting and deer roamed the lands was nothing short of majestic. What it lacked in interesting movement, it made up for in aesthetics, but it also adds enough random NPC encounters and hunting opportunities to take it over the line of being boring to fun. But then take Assassin's Creed, where it's just the same green ground and trees for ages, nothing exciting to hunt or track or collect, just the odd generic loot to pick up every now and then that I care nothing about. So I'm just beelining it from point A to point B so I can get back into swinging my massive axe. I find cars to be a lot more fun than horses though. The constant stream of vehicles and pedestrians that you have to dodge means that I'm actually having to think a little bit more about where I'm going. It's just enough of a challenge to get to my destination that I'm not bored. Still, despite the more grounded movement mechanics in these games, I reckon you could add just a smidge more dynamics in there without entering the realm of superhuman. Perhaps a slide, a dodge, or maybe something like this. Alright, it might be a bit much to see Michael running across the rooftops of Los Santos looking like Batman. Or maybe not. I mean, this is a game where a middle-aged dad of 2 carries 15 weapons at a time, kills thousands of people, and outruns the US military on his own. But if there's going to be a lot of running in the game, parkour makes movement so much more fun. That's the thing about Assassin's Creed. Running or riding through fields or deserts is really boring, but running through a city, over rooftops, and sliding under stalls is great fun. That's when the environment matches the movement really well. The parkour mechanics in Assassin's Creed has gone up and down over the series, but when it's at its best, it's fantastic. Chaining jumps and swings together with minimal interruptions is what it's all about. And just like with other movement mechanics, it's all about flow. There are few things more frustrating than scaling a wall at rapid pace only for your character to stop and take a lunch break. Personally, I'm in favour of breaking realism in games for the sake of more interesting gameplay, even if the game itself is supposed to be grounded in realism. I mean, even in supposedly heavily realistic games, there's a lot of wildly unrealistic things that are so commonplace we just don't even think about them anymore. And they don't even break our immersion either, like carrying a truckload of loot and weapons or jumping from a 20-foot wall without a scratch. Or you could be a fantasy game full of monsters and magic, but jumping from a small hut is a little too far.